Homang, Charlie Smith, Jongpanji, Georgia Strait. I'm the editor of the Georgia Strait, which is a weekly news and entertainment publication in Vancouver. And I'm glad to be back with WOW TV for another weekly installment of what we're covering in the news. One of the biggest stories in Vancouver over the past week was the death of Cory Monteith. And this was the 31-year-old star of Glee. He was an actor, a singer, a dancer, very popular in the city and across North America, but he had a drug problem, and he was found dead in his hotel in the Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel, which is just down by the waterfront, by the police. And this came after he hadn't checked out. And Cory Monteith had been in rehabilitation, drug rehabilitation, and was trying to deal with a substance abuse problem. The BC Coroner's Office conducted an investigation. It was a very quick investigation, and it concluded that drugs and alcohol were at the root of his death. One of our writers, Martin Dunphy, a senior editor, actually wrote quite a hard-hitting commentary questioning why the Coroner's Office would rush an autopsy. Normally, autopsies take about 6 weeks to do the proper toxicology tests and everything else. But in this case, the results were furnished very quickly. The coroner's service said that they accelerated the process because of the public interest. Martin Dunphy, our writer, questions whether this was actually in the public interest and whether it was actually done for the sake of convenience. Let's get the autopsy done quickly and get all the U.S. media off our back. Cory Monteith's death is big news. He's on the cover of Us magazine. He's on the cover of People magazine. Like, these are the most popular kind of magazines at the supermarket checkout. So his death is most certainly big news. It comes at a time when British Columbians are about to deal with an intriguing question about drug use. And there's a group called Sensible BC, which is just getting ready to have an initiative campaign, just like the HST, on whether to amend the Police Act to stop police from arresting people for simple possession of marijuana. Most British Columbians do not believe that people should be arrested for possession of marijuana, but at the same time, it's in the federal drug legislation that simple possession is a crime, and the number of people who've actually been getting arrested for possession has been increasing in British Columbia in recent years, which many people might find that to be a surprise. In Vancouver, the police have tended not to be very aggressive in terms of possession, whereas the charge rate has been increasing in jurisdictions that are policed by the RCMP. So one of the people who is involved with the BC Marijuana Party, Dana Larson, has decided that he's going to try and change it. So he and a fellow named Kirk Tusaw drafted legislation, and they submitted it to Elections BC, which you can do if you want to change a law. You don't have to wait until the members of the legislature change a law. You can actually draft your own legislation, and then what you have to do is collect signatures of 10% of the registered voters in each of BC's 85 constituencies. So the Sensible BC people are going to start on September 9th, and they have a huge job on their hands. They have to get volunteers to get the signatures of 10% of the registered voters, not just 10% of the residents, but actual registered voters in 85 constituencies. And if they do that, the initiative will succeed. And then what happens is a legislative committee is drafted. So what does Sensible BC want to happen? What Sensible BC would like is the BC Police Act to be changed that would basically make it extremely difficult for the police to arrest people for simple possession of marijuana. But it would also call for a commission to make more recommendations. And so this is going to be a big story going forward, and they're hoping to have the same success as the HST people. But the problem in doing this is it's a very, very big challenge to get that many signatures across the province and also to get it in every single constituency. And some of the areas where they're thinking they may have some difficulty, Surrey is one area. Areas where there's lots of multifamily residential is sometimes difficult to get the signatures because you can't get into the buildings to ask people. But they've got a big fight on their hands, and that's what they're trying to do. So one of the people who's been supporting this is Jody Emery. And Jody Emery is the wife of Mark Emery, who's very well known across British Columbia. Mark Emery, he's called the Prince of Pot, and for many years, he would sell marijuana seeds to anyone he had a mail order business where he would sell marijuana seeds so they could grow marijuana. Well, what happened was the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration in the U.S., John Walters, came to British Columbia in 2004, and Mark Emery was in the audience and started heckling him. So Mark Emery was shouting down John Walters, and then not long afterward, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration began a major investigation of Mark Emery for the sale of marijuana seeds. Well, Mark Emery had been paying taxes on his marijuana seeds, his sales in his business in Canada. Nobody in Canada told him that it was illegal, but what happened was the U.S. government charged him, or the Justice Department in Seattle, and he was prosecuted. First, he had to be extradited, and he was extradited from Canada with the support of the federal government and sent to Seattle, where he pleaded guilty. He's serving 5 years in a prison in Mississippi. He's scheduled to be released next year, but there was a new development this week, and that was that his wife, Jody Emery, revealed that the American government has approved Mark Emery's application to be transferred back to Canada to serve the rest of his sentence. So Mark Emery may be returning to Canada, but he needs the approval of Canada's public safety minister. Well, for many years, Canada's public safety minister was Vic Taves, who was a very stern former prosecutor from Manitoba who was extremely hostile to illegal drug use. So the issue was, as long as Vic Taves was the justice minister or the public safety minister, it didn't seem like there'd be a high likelihood of the federal government approving his return to Canada. It's very similar to the Omar Khadr situation. Omar Khadr was the young man who was arrested in Afghanistan for attacking U.S. forces and charged with murder. He was a Canadian, and the Harper government did not want him returning to Canada. So with Mark Emery serving his time in Mississippi, and he's had some difficulties. He contracted MRSA, which is a bacterial infection, and it's can't be treated with antibiotics. So it hasn't been a pleasant time for him in jail in Mississippi. But now he's eligible to come back, and the new Justice Minister is Stephen Blaney. Well, Stephen Blaney is an MP from Quebec, and the public doesn't know a lot about him, actually, so we'll see how he deals with this file. But now, according to Jody Emery, they're learning that the time that Mark Emery served in Canada just might not qualify for when he returns to Canada as time served. So this time served in Canada is included in his U.S. sentence, but it might not be included if he comes back across the border. So he's discussing with his lawyer whether it might be better for him to serve the rest of his term in the U.S. prison rather than come across the border and still have to face more time, or at least a longer period of parole, with Canadian authorities. So Jody Emery is going to be helping with the initiative campaign that Sensible BC is doing. But the other aspect of it, which is quite intriguing, is if Mark Emery returns to Canada, what happens with this initiative? Well, the parliamentary committee, the legislative committee, once it receives the initiative, has a choice. It can either draft a bill, it can kill it, or it can submit it to a referendum. The Sensible BC people want a referendum, just like we had with the HST, because they feel that a majority of British Columbians will support not arresting people for possession of marijuana. They would still arrest for trafficking, and they would still arrest for people who are underage, just not for adults for simple possession. So if Mark Emery comes back to British Columbia, what gets interesting is he going to barnstorm the province and travel the province and support and call for people to support the referendum to stop the police from arresting marijuana users. And this is where it gets interesting, because what are the police going to do? What are the police unions going to do? So far, the types of people who might have a problem with this whole initiative campaign have been relatively quiet. But if it gets to the point of being a referendum, it's possible that we could see opponents come forward, and then we're going to have a big public fight. So the drug situation in British Columbia is always interesting. British Columbia, in a lot of ways, is blazing its own trail in comparison to the rest of Canada. Vancouver was the first city in North America to have a government-funded needle exchange. Vancouver was the first city in North America to have a government-funded supervised injection site. And it's possible we may be the first province in Canada, British Columbia, to vote against allowing the police to arrest people for simple possession of marijuana.